At the end of February, Russia invaded Ukraine. Thousands of Russian troops entered the country, upending normal life for the 44 million people who call Ukraine home. Over the last almost 2 months, there have been countless media headlines covering the mass destruction and casualties across Ukraine. Many towns and cities have sustained heavy damage from the relentless gunfire and bombings. People's homes, schools, and communities have been flattened, erased completely from the landscape. In the wake of this devastation, millions of civilians seeking safety and refuge have fled to western regions of Ukraine or other countries entirely. As of early April, UNICEF reports that more than 4.2 million residents have left Ukraine.
We estimate that half of those, so over 2 million, are children. Another 2.5 million children displaced within the country. So that's more than 60% of the children of Ukraine who've been forced from their homes. I mean, it's almost beyond our capacity for imagination, really, to understand the scale of this crisis.
That's Joe English, a UNICEF spokesperson. UNICEF, which stands for United Nations Children's Fund, is a large agency of the United Nations providing humanitarian aid to children and adolescents around the world. In March, English flew to Ukraine and spent about 10 days in the country. He also traveled to Poland, where he spoke with many displaced Ukrainian families.
When families are making that decision to cross the border, that means leaving behind husbands, leaving behind fathers, leaving behind elder sons or older brothers, splitting families up, which has another level of impact on the kids. Many of these kids are having to say goodbye to their dad for the first time in their lives, being separated, going to a country that, they've never been to, they don't speak the language, with no real clear idea of when they'll be able to go home again.
Millions of Ukrainians are currently living with friends, family, or strangers in nearby European countries. But some have also crossed the ocean to places like the U.S. and Canada. You might be wondering, how do many refugees afford to pick up and move to some of these faraway places? Airline tickets can often be out of budget and a difficult process to book and navigate. One nonprofit that specializes in helping refugees with free airfare is Miles for Migrants. Since 2016, the charity has partnered with numerous NGOs to get connected to individuals and families who need help. So far, they've flown more than 28,000 refugees and asylum seekers to new countries. These migrants come from 86 countries where war, persecution, and disaster have upended their lives. Diane Padilla is the executive director of Miles for Migrants and says the organization has been keeping a close eye on the unfolding crisis in Ukraine.
Right now, we've currently already flown 72 Ukrainians to reunite with family members here in the U.S. We're really standing ready to help our NGO partners across the world when there's a need. I think our next phase will probably start focusing on flying Ukrainians to Canada. Canada has a great program that they're offering Ukrainians who want to resettle there. More to come on the U.S., and I think we will likely help fly intra-Europe, if it makes sense with the miles and cash, to fly to the U.K. as well.
In order to provide free travel to refugees and asylum seekers, Miles for Migrants heavily relies on people's monetary donations or the contribution of unused frequent flyer miles and credit card points. They also have partnerships with several airlines to make the process of pooling these miles and purchasing tickets easier. Padilla says many Americans don't realize the financial burden migrants take on in order to get to safety.
If you wanted to donate miles or even cash, you're really a hero in the story because your unused miles can really transform someone's life. People may not know this, but an individual like a refugee who needs to go to another country, we don't fly just to the U.S., but we fly to other countries, they would have to take out loans. And so we've heard from our NGO partners that they're just so incredibly grateful to the Miles for Migrants donors that they're willing to pay for their flights. Most flights, these long haul flights, can cost up to $1,000 per person. And I would say on average, what we're seeing is about a family of 7 that we're reuniting. So as you can imagine, that is a lot of money, particularly for anyone, for myself, but particularly for a refugee family. We've seen families from 6 all the way up to 13. And then when they come to the US, those repayments of those travel loans start after about 6 months when they land.
Arranging transportation and finding NGO partners can be a challenging process, but in the end, Padilla says it's all worth it. Since 2016, Miles for Migrants has reunited more than 10,000 families.
There was a brother and sister that were reunited. They were from Eritrea originally. I believe that she's in the UK. And she had just been waiting and worrying about her brother because their family members were no longer alive. And so to see the two reunited, it's just, I can't tell you. Like, I feel like I've even getting a little emotional now thinking about it. It's just so great to be able to see those individuals be reunited, because otherwise they'd have to wait that much longer to raise the funds on their own, or, like I said, take out a loan.
Above all, finding refuge is key for the millions of people across the world that have been displaced by conflict or disaster. Joe English at UNICEF says that during his time spent in Ukraine and Poland, displaced families echoed the same sentiment.
Every single one of them, their main priority was first the safety of their children, getting them to a safe space. And secondly, trying to get them somewhere where they can access education, access healthcare if they need it. Children all around the world have gone through 2 years of disruption to their education, and we've seen the critical impact that this can have on kids' development. And so for most parents, they want to make sure that their kids are back in school as soon as possible. They want to make sure that if they have specific medical needs, that these are being met.
And across the board, many Ukrainian refugees are already envisioning the day that they can return back to their homes, or what's left of it.
Honestly, every single family that I spoke to, every single one, when I asked them about their long-term hopes for the future, they want to go home. They want to go back to Ukraine. They want to, be able to rebuild the lives that they've left behind. But obviously, when you see the scenes of devastation in places like Mariupol, in places like Kharkiv, it's hard to imagine them being able to get back anytime soon. So ensuring that countries, the US, the UK, across Europe, are stepping up and taking their fair share of refugees and providing safe and legal routes to those who want to make these journeys is absolutely critical.
English highlights that all refugees and asylum seekers, whether it's from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Sudan, are seeking the same thing: safety. And in a perfect world, all should be extended the same opportunities and support by international organizations and countries.
We also can't forget about those who are fleeing conflicts everywhere else around the world, and also those who cannot flee. For every family who have fled their home, there is another who may be forced to remain because they have elderly relatives or they have children with disabilities or mobility issues, and so providing support to every single child and every single family affected not only by this conflict, but every conflict around the world is critical. It's an overwhelming need and it's an overwhelming aim, but it's in all of our interests to expand this sense of shared humanity outwards.
To find out more about this topic and our guests, Joe English and Diane Padilla, visit viewpointsradio.org. To donate or get involved in Miles for Migrants, head to their website at milesformigrants.org, which is spelled with the numeric number 4. You can also learn more about UNICEF and donate to their mission at unicef.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
The coral animal itself actually has a translucent skeleton.
Did you know that colorful underwater coral reefs are actually living animals? Then,
it's a masterpiece of using building materials to create an artistic effect.
It's safe to say there's nowhere in the world quite like the Big Apple. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.